Alright, Shalom. First and foremost, giving all praises, honor, glory, respect, and blessings to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rachak Kwadash. Salutations to the Lord's elect on the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth and sincerity while patiently waiting for Yahweh Shai's return. And double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, which have taught us everything we know through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. And welcome to another series of quick news being brought to you by the spirit and power of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. It says, Ghana to buy oil with gold instead of USD. Next for US-led coup. And this is basically another country that is dropping the United States dollar. Now, in past times, I have brought out an article on how China and Russia are drawing even closer to get away from the United States dollar. Now, before in times past, which you can check out the video I did, where basically I looked up what happens when the United States dollar is no longer the leading Federal Reserve. And they say that a lot of things will happen, devaluation, further inflation. And that's pretty much where the United States is heading. As time passes on, more countries continue to drop the dollar. We got Russia that's in on it. We got China that's in on it. We also got India. We also got Iran that's in on it. So there's a lot of countries that are dropping the United States dollar because they're beginning to see that the United States for a long time have been, even though it has not really been the United States controlling these different countries through its USD, it's really been the so-called elites. They're the ones, behind the scenes orchestrating all of this mess, using the United States. It's really been the so-called elites who have been orchestrating everything behind the scenes, using the United States to bully and push these other countries around using the USD. That's how the United States was able to create economic hitmen. That's how the United States have been able to destroy economies in different countries, financial systems in other countries, is all through the USD. So now these countries are starting to realize that the United States dollar is losing its force. It is losing its power and its control over these, especially these major countries. So now what's in the talks? We got Ghana, who is now fighting to drop the USD because they're starting to see that the USD is not really worth what it once used to be. Now I brought this out before, when the United States dollar actually was backed by something. That's when it was called greenbacks. Okay, greenbacks was when the United States dollar was backed by gold or silver. That's when it was called greenbacks. This was also known as a non-interest bearing currency. How come it was called a non-interest bearing currency? Because this was once a currency that was actually backed by something that had weight to it, such as gold and silver. Gold and silver has weight to it. A single piece of paper do not have weight by it. But if the dollar is backed by gold or silver, it has some kind of force and value to it. So that's why it was called a non-interest bearing currency. But over time, this dollar started to become a IOU. What is an IOU? A debt note. A debt note is an IOU. And you know what an IOU is? It means I owe you something. So here it is, right? as time passed, the dollar went from being backed by gold and silver to only being backed by silver. Even though the dollar was still backed by silver, it was still a greenback. It was still a non-interest bearing currency. But the moment silver left the dollar, that's when it became a interest bearing currency. That's when it became a IOU. Because originally it became a IOU because people would trade in their gold and their silver in exchange for USDs. For paper that would have gold on it or silver on it, right? So the moment people gave up all their gold and silver, right, that's when the IOUs came out. Because now that the bankers have all the gold and silver, you know, it's like they don't have to give you non-interest bearing currencies no more. Now they can put you as far in debt as much as possible. So once people gave up all their gold and silver for those dollars backed by gold and silver, guess what? That's when they started to give you IOUs, which a IOU is basically paper money that's not backed by anything except paper. And that's when the dollar started to become worthless. And this was around the early 1900s, believe it or not. Well, when the first Federal Reserve Bank was set up here in America, that's when this debt note started to become an IOU, which was, I believe, 1911 was when the first Federal Reserve was set up here in America, the first Federal Reserve Bank. That's when they started handing out these IOUs, these fucking paper notes, which was backed by nothing. And a dollar that is not backed by gold or silver is known as an interest-bearing currency. And you know what an interest-bearing currency is? It is a currency that revolves around interest. That's why there's taxes. That's why whenever a bank gives you a loan, if you don't pay back on time, you got to pay 10% interest back on whatever you owe. So like for an example, let's just say if a bank loan you $1,000 and you did not pay it back, what's 10% of $1,000 if you don't pay it back? 10% of $1,000 is $100. So if you failed to pay $1,000 back within that month, guess what? You owe $1,100. Okay? Now you got to pay 10% of $1,100. And it keeps on stacking until you're able to pay off the full amount. But with a non-interest bearing currency, you know, interest do not build up over time if you receive a loan. You know, you have a set time to pay it off, and that's it. Once you pay it off, that's it. So the dollars you have in your pocket now is worthless. It is an interest-bearing currency, which are non-greenbacks. Your dollar might be green, but it does not mean that it is a greenback. Okay, greenbacks are backed by gold and silver, and not a single dollar that you have in your pocket is backed by gold or silver. You're using a interest-bearing currency note, which is a debt note, a IOU note. Basically, the bank saying I owe you, but in actuality, they're making it to where you owe them. That's why as soon as you're born in this society, what happens? You're born in debt. So Ghana is dropping this USD because they're beginning to see that the USD do not hold the same force as it once did in the late 1800s. Going into the very early 1900s. So the more countries that drop the USD, the less value the dollar come. You know what? You know, just for edification's sake, let's just go ahead and see what happens when the USD is no longer the reserve currency. So this is what happens when the United States dollar is no longer the reserve currency. And that means the leading reserve currency. Whatever debt you have now will follow you into a currency reset. No matter the world. Look up currency reset. Okay, I believe if your debt resets, that means that they won't let you pay it off, and pretty much you're just in debt for the rest of your life. You cannot buy a vehicle. You cannot own a house. Not that you own a house, because the house you own do not belong to you anyway. It belongs to the so-called elites. So you can't buy a house. I mean, you could rent one, but you cannot buy it off. You cannot buy a car. You cannot own a jet. You can't do nothing if your debt resets. You see? So a lot comes with your debt that you owe resetting. So whatever debt you have now will follow you into a currency reset. No matter the world reserve currency, you will still owe your mortgage, credit card, car, and college tuition. The big difference is that those dollars will now be worth mere pennies. You see that? Mere pennies. So that's what it means. That's what I meant by devaluation. The more countries that drop this dollar, the more closer the United States get to it not beating the more these countries drop the United States dollar, the closer the United States dollar gets to not becoming the leading. Salak. Let me rephrase that. The more countries that drop the United States dollar, the closer the United States dollar gets to not being the world's reserve currency, the world's leading reserve currency. Because right now the USD is still the world's leading reserve currency, but the more countries that drop the United States dollar, the closer the United States dollar gets to not being the world's leading reserve currency. And when that happens, this dollar is going to be so worthless, it's going to be worth mere pennies. And that's why they show you in movies like I Am Legend, where if you notice in that movie I Am Legend, what did you see? You seen people who basically threw their money out in the streets. All you seen was streets filled with dollars. You know why people was throwing their money in the streets? Because the money in their wallet was worthless. You could have $1,000 today. That $1,000 one day will be worth $10. You could have $1 million. One day that $1 million will be worth $100. Maybe even $1,000. $1 million one day will be worth $1,000. So all you guys out there who's chasing money, you're wasting your time. Because one day, your dollar, a $1 bill, is going to be worth a mere penny. So $100 is going to equal up to what? $1? Like, you see what I mean? So people is going to struggle to buy groceries, and that's going to lead to people raiding grocery stores, and that's going to lead to a famine. Because who the hell is going to be able to afford, $2,000 worth of groceries a month? Especially when you got bills to pay. Could you imagine paying a $500 gas bill? That's going to be like trying to pay $5,000 in gas. So these countries are going to continue to drop the USD. Because these countries are sick and tired of America, and they're sick and tired of America pushing them around using the United States dollar. So now let's go to the King James Bible. Online.org. Okay, let's type in. Let's see. Is it Ezekiel chapter 7 verse 19? Check this out. Ezekiel chapter 7 verse 19. It says, "They shall cast their silver in the streets." Your silver is a representation of your your money you got in your pocket. It's not talking about actual silver. The silver is a metaphor because back in the ancient world, gold and silver was a medium that you would use in exchange to buy goods. So if you wanted to buy something, you would give a certain amount of gold or silver in exchange for that commodity, that food, or that particular item. What you use today in order to exchange for good foods, items, or merchandise is what? The dollar. That's what you use to make purchases. So the silver is a metaphor for the money that you use today to make purchases. So it says, they shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. Okay, their gold shall be removed. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. Okay? Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. You hear that? They shall not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because it is the stumbling block of their iniquity. So your money is not going to be able to deliver you in the time of the Lord's wrath. Also, because I mentioned how this could lead to a famine. You know, when people cannot afford to buy food, that's going to lead to theft. It's going to lead to people stealing. It's going to lead to people running out of grocery stores with carts full of food out of panic. Okay? So that's going to lead to a famine because a grocery store can only hold up to 3 days worth of food. After that, there ain't going to be no more food in the stores. Now imagine if crowds of people just ran into a grocery store in one day and just took all the food they wanted. Basically, a grocery store overnight can go empty on food. You see that? So that can lead to a famine, a food shortage. People raiding the corner shops, stealing food. Okay? Matthew 24:7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines. And what is a famine? A shortage of food and water, and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Okay? So there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. You see? All these are the beginning of sorrows. With that, I'm going to say, Shalom is on to the next one.